Today we'll discuss the upcoming new moon on January 29, 2025. It will be in the 10th degree of Aquarius. I've already posted a forecast on the Live Horoscopes website. Let's check it out and highlight the key points of this new moon. Here's what the new moon charts look like. The luminaries are in Aquarius, in the 10th degree. We can immediately see they have a favorable aspect to Jupiter in Gemini. This is a notable feature of the new moon, indicating favorable circumstances. Let's examine the new moon's dispositor. It's the ruler of the new moon. Saturn primarily governs Aquarius and is in Pisces. It doesn't have any clear tense aspects. Well, unless you count a long-lasting one. The separating square aspect to Jupiter will be active for almost half a year. Venus is near Saturn, and a trine to Mars is forming. Overall, Saturn doesn't seem tense. We can conclude that the next lunar month won't have many large-scale extraordinary events. Major natural disasters are unlikely. The only thing to note is the strengthening of the air element. Mercury, the luminary, Jupiter, all are in this element, increasing the likelihood of winds, storms, and hurricanes in February. Attention should be on the interaction between Mars and Pluto. Mars is retrograde, entering Cancer, and the opposition aspect seems to be separating, but it's like a drawn bowstring because this aspect will be in force. Until the end of April 2025, as noted, Mars and Pluto projections have brought major incidents, aviation accidents, and social political unrest in their projection areas, as well as natural emergencies, like hurricanes. I usually note tense midpoints, the average points of planets. In this case, I didn't find any obvious midpoints that should be considered for predicting extraordinary events. But there is an interesting midpoint. Uranus is at the midpoint between Mars and Venus. This combination can indicate a quick awakening of feelings, love at first sight, as well as a quick awakening of feelings of hatred or repulsion. This is also possible. Those in Uranus projection areas this month may observe this midpoint's effect on themselves or acquaintances and then write to me about it in YouTube or Facebook comments. Yes, it must be said that since the new moon is in Aquarius this month, the likelihood of exacerbating chronic diseases related to the calves increases, as well as increased pressure on the psyche and exacerbation of nervous diseases. One remedy this month is to organize more meetings and communication with friends, like-minded people, and benefit from breathing exercises, as well as developing endurance and psychological practices related to maintaining calmness and balance. Forecast of extraordinary events. As I have already indicated, the new moon does not contain such obvious indications of large-scale natural disasters. This lunar month looks relatively mild. There is an intensification of the air element, which means the likelihood of emergencies similar to hurricanes. Tornadoes and storms are still present. In Saturn's projection areas, the risks from the water element increase, as well as the likelihood of sharp, noticeable temperature deviations from the average in this region. In Uranus's projection area, deviations related to the earth element are likely. I do not expect major earthquakes, but volcanoes may become active, as well as the reality of some explosions inside buildings, in the subway, underground, Uranus's projection this month may indicate a quick rapprochement of people due to sympathy, as well as sudden breakups. In the Mars-Pluto projection area, there may be military or criminal activity spikes, as well as fires, hurricanes, storms, industrial accidents, harmful emissions into the environment, government resignations, arrests of major officials, politicians, influential people in this country. For example, last month in South Korea, there was a resignation, or rather the arrest of the president of this country, a forceful arrest, with the storming of his residence. This happened not without the participation of the Mars and Pluto projections. The timing of emergencies can be read additionally. I will not voice them. Let's move on to the geocards. Maps of Europe. First, I pay attention to the projections of the most tense planets, Mars and Pluto. Mars passes through Iceland, Norway, part of Sweden, through Lithuania, Belarus, Ukraine. Part of Turkey then goes to Iraq, the Red Sea, Kuwait, Dubai. Yes, but, of course, Iceland deserves attention. Here, so to speak, there is a double-triple penetration of tense projections and, likely, the activation of volcanoes, as often happens. The passage of Mars near the capital of Norway is alarming. Pluto also passes through Norway. In general, the entire space between the projections of Mars and Pluto can be considered tense. I marked a neutral zone here, but I mean that the Mars-Pluto opposition is still in force. Therefore, both Stockholm and Helsinki, Riga, and Minsk all fall into the tense zone. But for Norway, the next lunar month obviously looks quite tense, just like for Ukraine. Through Kyiv, besides Mars, Saturn also passes. In this case, we can say with great confidence that the next month, February, looks critical, possibly for the government of this country. Saturn also affects Transnistria, affects Moldova, passes through Turkey and affects the capital of Turkey. Therefore, well, yes, to some extent, Venus in the east and center of Turkey will improve the situation for vacationers, for the country's economy. But this Saturn indicates that the next month looks tense, unfavorable for Turkey. Venus will greatly improve the situation in the Middle East. It will pass through long-suffering Syria, pass near Damascus, and improve the microclimate around Israel. But this can be associated with the recent truce or peace, with the release of hostages that occurred in January. The projection of the Sun and Moon luminaries this month is very gentle, very weakly tense. So for Scotland, despite this blue color, there are likely no major large-scale problems. These 3 lilac spots are marks of my experimental projection, which I will be testing over the next year. Jupiter's projection improves conditions for residents of Spain and France in the border areas of these countries. Conditions for tourism and living on the Balearic Islands, Majorca, are improving. For Finland, the month looks quite tense. Helsinki falls into the space between Mars and Pluto. In addition, the projection of Saturn and the projection of Pluto pass through the Russian-Finnish border. I heard that there are plans to open the border, at least one trial. Well, February. This is not the best month. For this, everything may not go according to plan. Moscow. Moscow is at the intersection of, on one side, tense Pluto, and on the other side, favorable Venus. Therefore, we can say that for Russia, the month overall looks moderately tense or moderately favorable. The projection of the luminaries passes through Kazan, Perm, Orenburg. In this area, some tension is possible, and not only related to the weather but also with the reflection, for example, of drone attacks. So, the projection of Pluto also passes again through Aktau, through the Caspian region of Russia and Kazakhstan, and Turkmenistan. The month looks tense for Iraq because the projection of Mars affects the capital Baghdad. Asia. In Asia, the projection of Mars and Pluto can be immediately noted, and the space between them, which absorbs Kamchatka. This region is seismically active, saturated with volcanoes, so earthquakes and volcanic awakenings can occur here. But this month, as I have already noted, the overall situation of this new moon is quite mild. I don't think there will be anything extraordinary here. Saturn's projection curiously passes near, approaching Baikal from the north. It can create abnormal weather conditions, severe cold, or heavy rains. And it passes near Beijing. To some extent, Jupiter's projection will mitigate Saturn's influence, but still, the next lunar months can only be recognized as tense, unfavorable for China due to Saturn's projection. Saturn's projection also affects Taiwan, as well as the capital of the Philippines, Manila. Therefore, for the Philippines, the next month also looks unfavorable. Uranus's projection this month passes through Krasnoyarsk, passes through Tibet, through Bangladesh, affects Burma. In these countries, protest activity is possible. But at the same time, it must be said that this month Uranus also has positive properties. It can awaken creative abilities, enhance the desire for invention, and introduce reforms. It would be interesting to hear feedback from the residents of Krasnoyarsk about how their February will go, what changes they will have in life. Write comments. It's interesting. It is also necessary to note some tensions in India. But if the projections of the luminaries can be neglected this month, then the projection of Pluto will create tension on the western coast of the Indian subcontinent. Africa. In Africa, the situation looks quite clear. The west of Africa is overloaded with tense energies. Here are Mars and Pluto, the main such bandits of the last few months. The west coast of Africa, the Cape Verde Islands, the Canary Islands, all fall into this tense zone. There may be strong storms, fires, industrial accidents. The risk of road traffic accidents may increase. Uranus affects the capital of Nigeria, Togo, Benin, Ghana, and Côte d'Ivoire. And, of course, Mali. In all these countries, protest activity, military activity, strong thunderstorms, and strong winds are possible. Uranus affects the capital of South Africa, a country that has recently been gaining more significance. It is the only African country that first joined BRICS. Saturn's projection very accurately passes through the capital of Egypt, through the capital of Sudan. In these countries, unfavorable conditions are created for tourism and their economy in the next lunar month. The capital of Uganda, Kampala, is also affected. The next month is unfavorable. Venus's projection will improve the situation in Ethiopia, Kenya, and Mozambique. Another curious moment. Venus's projection passes near Mecca, and as I have long noticed, if Mecca is occupied by favorable planetary projections, this is a good indication for the entire Islamic world. February is favorable for the promotion of the Islamic religion. We can move on to the next map, North America. Let's first pay attention to Mars and Pluto. They are our main trendsetters in the next lunar month in terms of tension. And we immediately see Pluto passing through the capital of Canada, the city of Ottawa. Besides Pluto's projection, Mars and Uranus also pass through Canada and the USA. But for Canada, Everything looks much more tense because only the moon's projection passes through Washington in this case, which is weakly tense, thanks to the trine aspect between the luminaries and Jupiter. But for Canada, the next month looks very tense. Here we recall the words Trump said about Canada, that he plans to raise trade tariffs against Canada. Apparently, the consequences will be noticeable and very unpleasant for Canada. Jupiter's projection improves the situation in Canada from the north, as well as in British Columbia. Saturn passes through the capital of Alaska. February is not the best time for Alaska either. This may be related to worsening weather, severe frosts, or perhaps seismic activity near Alaska. Vancouver is in my lilac zone. This is an experimental projection, and I will be observing it. We see that Central America is also quite heavily loaded with the projection of Uranus and Pluto. The coming months are definitely unfavorable for Mexico. Mars projection passes near the capital. By the way, Texas is very much affected, as well as Chicago and Atlanta. All these major cities are also under tension, which will manifest in February. Jupiter's projection will improve living and leisure conditions in the Dominican Republic. Yes, we can say that Jupiter's projection improves conditions for leisure and living in the Hawaiian Islands. Now we can move on to South America. I've already mentioned the tension affecting Mexico. Here, additional tension is added, related to the Yucatan Peninsula, Guatemala, and Nicaragua. Saturn's projection affects Georgetown, the capital of Guyana, a bit of Suriname, and the tropical equatorial region of Brazil. Here, by the way, there are often floods and problems due to heavy rains. Saturn also affects the mountainous part of Bolivia and Paraguay. But there are also good indicators, and for South America, we can say there are more. This is the projection of Jupiter and Venus. Venus improves conditions for the central part of Brazil, as well as for the part of Brazil bordering Uruguay. For Uruguay, the next lunar month, February, doesn't look so bad. Jupiter improves the situation around Venezuela, passes near Caracas, goes through the capital of Bolivia, La Paz, and affects, we can say, a large part of Chile, Santiago. For Chile, the next lunar month also looks good. Australia. In Australia, the picture is quite clear to me. First, we focus on Mars and Pluto. And we see that to the east of Australia, due to the influence of Mars, Pluto, and Uranus, a large tense zone is forming, where cyclones and typhoons may traditionally form and then move towards Australia or New Zealand. February looks tense in this sense for both Australia and New Zealand. Yes, the likelihood of shipwrecks, strong storms, and fires increases. Saturn's projection, which passes through Beijing. Here we see its continuation. It affects the Philippines and part of Indonesia. Perhaps this is where Bali is located, popular with travelers. Jupiter's projection improves the situation near the central capital island, with the city of Jakarta, Indonesia, and also improves living and leisure conditions in Western Australia. This concludes the main review. I wish you a good February, a good mood, and I remind you that in a month we will already meet another Chinese New Year. I wish you to meet it well and prepare well. Goodbye.